Alright, hello again and welcome back to another video. Today we're kind of doing a little bit of an overview, sort of like we've done before on the old IDI, but a little bit different. We're going to focus only on cold start problems, and then later we'll go into hot start issues and drivability concerns in different videos, so stick around for those if you have any interest. But this one we're going over cold start problems. So there's basically three things that'll always plague these motors: no glow plugs, or bad glow plugs, bad controller, bad relay, that sort of thing. Air intrusion issues, right? So that could be on the supply side where you're sucking air, or it could be on the return side and the system drains off overnight or something, and then you end up with no fuel at the top of the system, so you'll have to burp it. The third one is starter, batteries, and cables, where you can't get the starter spinning quick enough. And I have a little bit of a theory on how I'm gonna try to demonstrate that one. That will be the hardest one actually to show what's happening, but hopefully I can pull that off. Now, what gave me the idea for this was the other day I come out here and this thing just did not want to start cold. And so I had to start digging into it. To be honest, at first I thought it was a fuel problem, but I had the wherewithal to record the next morning while I was doing the same thing to try to start it again at the tailpipe. That way I could watch for little puffs of smoke that would tell me that it was getting fuel. So that's another thing to pay attention to. So the first one that we're going to go over is glow plug failure, because that one I already have a video clip of, so I don't need to re-record that, and I'll show you what my problem wound up being. So my issue was actually super dumb and super simple. Here's your glow plug relay, right? You've got signal ground, signal, power in, and power to the plugs. What was actually wrong with mine, because I had to rerun these wires whenever I got the truck, because this stud broke off the original glow plug relay and it took part of the connection with it, so new wires have been run for this. But the connection on the truck side was just corroded and gross, and I cleaned it up and it 100% fixed my issue. At the same time, I took this connector apart, which obviously the retainer broke, as to be expected, but I took it apart, sprayed it out, and put dielectric grease in it, so I should never have to deal with that again. At the same time, I went to all the glow plug connections on the truck and sprayed and cleaned them out also, and this truck did get new glow plugs when I bought it 4 months ago. So everything is new, the controller's new, the relay's new, the plugs are new. So the only thing that's old here is the wiring itself, which wound up being an issue just with one of these two connections. I'm not exactly 100% sure, but with that, it was a weak glow. It was still kicking the relay, right? So the controller was doing its job, the relay was doing its job because the signal wires were fine. So the light in the dash still did a long glow, 8 seconds, whatever it was, before I went to crank it over, and then it was popping on and off like it's supposed to during the rest of your cold start cycle. So as far as the controller and the relay were concerned, everything was good to go. It was just weak power going to the glow plugs. Another way I was able to verify that was I took my pin tester, put in one of the glow plug controllers, and took 12 volt permanent hot and hit the hot side of the relay, the signal wire, so that way it was sending power straight to the plugs, and I was only getting about 11 volts, and you should be seeing 12 or a little over, because healthy charged battery should be 12.5, almost 13. So you're going to get a draw from the glow plug, so it's going to dip a little bit. So I would have liked to have seen closer to 12, and it was just barely over 11. So anyway, that's what this looks like. So to demonstrate the next most common issue, I'm going to do something which you should probably never do, which is deliberately empty some of the fuel out of the filter. because this is where the air goes. Also, if you're like me and your lefts and rights are a little confused whenever you're turning shit upside down, go ahead and hit the like button. Fear not, the extra diesel out of the filter is going into my parts bath. That's not just being wasted. Okay, there we go. That filter is not totally empty, but damn near. That way nobody can say that I'm bullshitting it. These filters don't really have to be that tight, but when you got diesel all over the entire damn thing, good luck grabbing a hold of it well enough to hand tighten it how you're supposed to. That felt nice. So anyway, we're gonna let that evaporate since I'm trying to clean up a little bit of the mess I just made on purpose. And once that's done, we will go crank on the truck and we'll show you exactly what happens. Basically how this is gonna work is the filter is the high point of the system. So this line coming out is still gonna have fuel in it. Everything coming out on the other side of the filter is also going to have fuel in it. So the lines down there still have fuel, the injection pump is still full of fuel, but there's going to be this big old air pocket that it's going to try to drink. And what's going to happen is it will light off and it should die almost immediately, and then I will have to really crank on it. Now where a lot of guys go wrong with this is, and it's actually, it's per a Ford TSB, so I understand why everyone is doing it, but it's not the correct way to run these. A lot of guys will cap this line off that goes down to your return cap. They'll knock this off because it can help keep the system primed if you have an air leak somewhere else. However, what that will do is, this is designed so that the air that the pump is trying to pull will actually get pushed out of this guy because he goes up. So he is technically the highest point in the entire fuel system is right here. I mean, really it should sit even a little higher than mine does, but I ran out of hose and that's just the way it is. But it still allows the return system to drink quite a bit of that air so that the injection pump doesn't have to do all of that work by itself, because what's going to happen is air compresses, fuel doesn't. At least not much. I don't recall if diesel's totally incompressible or if it's like a 90% type of deal. These injectors are fired off the pot pressure, so the injection pump is going to have to spin enough to get the air compressed enough to hit pot pressure on the injector to get it to open the nozzle. That way the nozzle can drink air. Well, thankfully, because this is our high side, our air should come up here. As soon as it drinks all the fuel off of this side, the mechanical pump will push enough fuel to probably fill the filter. So we're only going to have a little bit of a pocket of air. And whenever you let off the key, the air will come back up here and get caught in the filter head. Then whenever you go back to crank it, it should push all the air into the return side through this hose and allow the system to self-prime and self-bleed. That's how this is supposed to work. Is this guy is supposed to let the system bleed itself, just the same as you would opening the bleeder screw Schrader valve on the side of the filter head, but without having to have a helper or having to jump the solenoid to get it to happen. So hopefully that's dry enough now after my rambling, and we can try to demonstrate. So hopefully that demonstration made some sense, because you can tell that there's still fuel left in the primary system. So you start it and it runs, and then as soon as the air gets to the pump, it dies. Then the air immediately starts trying to go through the return system because I left that other hose hooked up and made sure that I was sealed everywhere else instead of bypassing it. And you saw, I mean, this thing cranks really well, and you saw still how much cranking you have to do on it to get it to burp the rest of the air out. Now imagine that if all of it had to go through the injection pump and push those fuel nozzles open instead of a good majority of it being allowed to go through the return system. That's why I don't like bypassing that. The original design wasn't ever meant for that to be bypassed like that on these. It was done in a Ford TSB, but that was really more of a band-aid than a solution. The only true way to make sure that these start well as far as fuel goes is to make sure that your return caps are good, the O-rings are good, your return lines are cut to the correct length, have good compression clamps on them, the spring clamps, not worm gear clamps, and everything is tight, top to bottom, front to back, in the fuel system. If you do that, it's no different than whenever you dip your straw in your Sonic drink and put your finger over the end of it and pull it out and it's holding Coke. Well, if everything's sealed up top, it doesn't matter if it wants to drain back to the tank. It can't, because there's a vacuum basically at that point. So that's what happens whenever you have a return system leak. If you have a supply side leak, it will give similar symptoms. However, if it's on the supply side, like a pinhole in the line under the truck on the supply side going to the mechanical pump like my truck had, it will do that, except it will do it in 20 minutes. You can shut the truck off, come back to it 20 minutes later, and it'll do exactly that. If it's on the return side, it should take much longer for it to drain back. Now, a really bad return system with like non-existent O-rings or holes in the return hoses, can it drain back that fast? Yeah, but it's not as likely, because on the supply side from the factory, it's all steel line. So that pinhole, once it wears a pinhole in it, steel or nylon, either way, that hole's just open. On the return side, it's all rubber hose for the most part. So rubber will sort of swell and kind of close its own holes a little bit. So generally speaking, on the return side, it should be like an overnight type of situation where you lose fuel prime. On the supply side, you could lose it in, honestly, I had mine lose it in as little as 5 minutes because of the pinhole that was in the steel line under the transmission on mine. So the only other thing that I can think of to go over is batteries, starter, connections, and cranking speed. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about batteries, cables, and starters and all that stuff. So this thing still has the original cables. I cut back the ends, they were corroded, and put new parts store terminals on all 4 posts. What you can do on this one is, because it'll have that straight pass through, cut it as close as you can and double it up on one of these big commercial terminals for the battery. It'll work just fine. Standard, follow these cables and clean your grounds going to the block. Even with good grounds, this cable's pretty warm after all that cranking. Now, this one over here, it had such a bad connection that it actually started melting and burning the tape because it was getting so damn hot. It had such a bad ground connection and it was barely spinning the engine fast enough for it to start. So follow these cables down, clean your connections. They're on the top, the front of the block. And then there's one for your glow plug system, or at least maybe the starter signal wire. It's right down here behind the vacuum pump. Take it off and clean it as well. New batteries. Everybody likes to talk about doing the Group 31 battery conversion. You can. I find that unnecessary. These Motorcraft batteries are rock freaking solid. The first IDI I had, I bought a set of these for it and I cranked on it like hell. for 4 years that I had that truck, and I never had an issue with the batteries going dead unless there was a fuel or glow plug related issue that made me have to crank on it so much that it just killed it that way. So here's the luxury that I have. My truck is now equipped with a tach. It was factory wired for it, and I finished doing the install earlier this week. So what I'm gonna do is unplug the fuel shutoff so it will not start, and we're just going to show you the cranking speed on the tach. Unplug the glow plug so we don't use those for no reason, and let's go show you about how fast this thing is spinning. I failed to mention the starter. If you have good battery connections and everything like that, there is no need to do the gear reduction style starter. These direct drive starters will actually spin it faster and start the truck better as long as the rest of the system is good to go. The gear reduction starters use less electricity, so they're better in the case where you have weak cables, a weak fuel system, weak glow plugs, that sort of thing. As long as everything else is good to go, the direct drive starter is actually my preference on these. This truck originally came with a gear reduction starter, and I retrofitted it with the original direct drive style. So let that buzzer go out. I guess that tach doesn't respond well to just cranking speed. But still yet, you should get a reasonable idea about how fast this thing spins over, and that's what you're looking for. That's the name of the game with these motors, is cranking speed. If you don't have crank speed, it will not start even whenever it's warm. It's certainly not cold out here, so my cold start clip from the other day, whenever it was 70 degrees, I know that that's not exactly what most of y'all are probably looking for. However, it should light off basically like it's not even doing a cold start whenever it's, you know, 60 degrees plus. So if you can get it to where it's doing that during the warm part of the year, whenever it's easy to work on your truck, come wintertime, you shouldn't have an issue. So anyway, that's just kind of a basic overview of starting issues with these old IDIs. They're cantankerous. I'm not going to say that they aren't. They're very cantankerous, and they can be a little grumpy during warm weather. Well, imagine how grumpy they can be during cold weather. I've got a video of my old 83 doing a cold start, which I'm pretty sure I've shown already in this video at some point, but that should kind of give you an idea of the challenges that you can have even with a bit of a healthy one. You know, if it can't crank over super fast, or your glow plugs are a little bit weak, or maybe your connections are a little bit loose or something like that, man, these things can really be a bear to get going whenever it's cold, and that's why a lot of folks don't like these old diesels. Thing of it is, if everything's good to go, man, you really shouldn't have any issues. Keep your fuel treated, make sure you're running some sort of lubrication additive, and during the winter for sure some type of anti-gel or something like that, because the fuel heater works on like none of them. So good luck with that. That's pretty much all I can think of to go over in this one. I hope that maybe this was a little bit helpful for somebody out there. If y'all have any questions, hit me up in the comments. Appreciate it. Have a good one.